This is insane. I've like tried to do this same video like 4 times now. The first time was like yesterday when I just wasn't there. I was mentally challenged or something. And then I tried tonight and my screensaver went off. And then I tried again and some random error occurred. And then I just tried again and it ended up being over 16 minutes long. And apparently I have a 15-minute video time maximum allowance or something like that. So we're going to give it a fifth try here. And I'll try to be faster. This is The Hiltons by J. Randy Taraborrelli. This book begins in 1887 when Conrad Hilton was born. As you can see, it's very thick. The chapters are very short. It's an extremely good book. Captivates you, draws you in, and since the chapters are short, you keep getting to a good ending point, but then looking and seeing, oh, it's only another 7 or 8 pages, and so you start the next one, and you repeat this process over and over. The next thing you know, it's 5 in the morning, and you're still reading. You're like, darn it! Trust me, this book kept me up past 5 many days. So that's just a warning. I'm going to try to just mention a few things since I have a 15-minute time limit. The first really cool thing is when he's 14, he goes up into his mother's room. On her sewing table, he finds a book of Optimism by Helen Keller, and it just enthralls him. He reads it over and over all night, and it shaped the way he viewed life. And it was cool to see a book that I personally have read and enjoyed have such an impact on a man who later would have a huge impact on our nation, an impact on our recent history. Because this Hilton hotel chain is huge and everybody knows about it. A little bit later, his father, he had a store, and so he was doing a lot better than most other people during that time era. And this was a time when things were tough. People had lots of kids and lived in small houses, so you'd have like all these children in one small house and they'd all be on the floor together and stuff, and it was just tough and rugged and challenging. But since their father had a store, they were doing better than most people. So every time a new child was born, he would build an addition onto the house. So each child had his own room. Now, I'm not saying the house was nice. They probably used rugged, ratty materials, and it was probably like a beat-down old farmhouse like all the others. But the point is it had more rooms than normal. Anyway, for some reason, some tough times hit the region they were living in. So much so that his father lost the store that he had all that time, and the family gathered together in the room, started brainstorming ideas to keep the family afloat. And it was Conrad who came up with the idea. He's like, our house has so many rooms because they had a big family. And I think we should have the children all share rooms, and then all these extra rooms we have, we should run a little hotel. And so that's what they did. And between his mother's great cooking and Conrad's incredible instincts and intuition on how to serve people, make them feel comfortable at home, suddenly it got like a good reputation. It did really well and ended up pulling them through during these hard times. Eventually his father was able to open up another store and they got their life back on track. So eventually Conrad moves out. He does a number of things. I don't remember all of them. I know he went into the service. He also actually went into politics for a while, but he didn't enjoy that. Eventually the oil boom in Texas began. He went down to be a part of that, but when he stayed in this old rickety hotel, what he noticed was that people were just lining up, and people would even stay for just moments, and the second someone would leave, it'd be filled up again because there just wasn't enough hotel for the demand at that time, and dollar signs went off in his eyes, and he's like, forget this oil stuff, I'm going into the hotel business. He had made a lot of good choices, so even though he was young, he had 5,000 saved up, which isn't very much nowadays, but this is like the early 1900s, so money went way further back then. This is the same time era, actually even earlier, than when my grandpa found a 50-cent piece and went and bought like a hamburger and fries and shake and just lived up and still had a quarter left when he went home. So money was way different back then than it is now. So he asked them how much they wanted, and it was 40,000. So he was way short. But he had a vision, he had a plan, and he knew this is what was going to take him somewhere. So he did what he had to do. I don't know who he begged, what strings he pulled, what favors he did, but somehow he got that 35,000 and he got this hotel, and he like tore down some walls, made it aesthetically pleasing. It was set up now in a way that made sense, and between setting it up in such a way to make the guests happy and comfortable and his own instincts on how to treat people and make them feel at home and welcome and well taken care of, this hotel did really, really good. And so he started going around and finding other beat down old hotels and fixing them up and then renting out all his rooms to people, and it was doing well. He was building like a mini empire, but he kept expanding and eventually had this vision to build this grand hotel. So he builds this really nice one, and he's pretty stretched thin, and all of a sudden it's October 29th, Black Friday. The whole economy just goes down the toilet. The Great Depression begins. People start jumping out of buildings and killing themselves, and people are losing their houses, filing bankruptcy, struggling to eat. It's a dark time in our history. I've mentioned in some earlier videos how this affected my grandparents. I mean, they had huge pantries full of food, gardens out back to grow food, money hidden all over the house. It made an impact, and Conrad was hit very hard by this as well. He lost all his hotels except for the grand one he had just made, and he had to wall off like 90% of it and cut off all the power to it, get rid of all the staff but his best people, and just try to run what little he could. And it was hard because almost no one was staying in hotels. They're just trying to eat and survive. It's a hard, hard time. But because he had read Helen Keller's book Optimism, and he had like this belief that eventually the country would bounce back and grow once again, he wouldn't give up. He wouldn't let go. And he did everything he could to keep the hotel afloat. He would trade favors for product. He would pull strings. He would have people own him and promise them shares when things got going again. And he even had this bellboy or elevator operator give him his life savings, which was $500, which again sounds small, but at the time was actually a decent amount of money and just what he needed to not lose the hotel. So anyway, he ended up staying afloat until the country recovered. And all the other hotel people had to file bankruptcy during this time, so all of a sudden his name is gold. They remember that during the toughest time in the country, he stayed afloat and he met all his obligations. He paid everyone back everything he owed. He had like this sterling reputation now. And so at this point, he just starts expanding and exploding. And so this book just goes over his life. It was a fascinating life because once he became successful, he's kind of like part of Hollywood's elite and has all these huge parties and lives a lavish life that's like a fairy tale. And it goes over the lives of his three sons, especially the older two. And there's a lot of really, really good stuff in this book. And I just love reading books like this about people like us who start from nothing, but somehow get a vision and a belief and create something amazing. Because I don't think most of us want billion-dollar empires. I think most of us just want to be free. So we don't have to have the same exceptional greatness, this same insane dedication to go out and create a billion-dollar company. We can just believe in ourselves, see that there's opportunity out there, put some focus and energy into building something that isn't gigantic and worth billions, but just enough to make us free, something to sustain us, something to give back to the world and create win-win situations where we offer our gifts to others and it impacts their life, and in return they help sustain us. And it's a tough world out there, and it's hard to have this kind of belief when the media is constantly talking about how poor everyone is and how the rich is exploiting us, and then all your friends are telling you, be realistic, don't live up in the clouds, because they're not trying to be mean, they're not trying to be negative. They've had their own dreams squashed because life is tough, and they don't want you to go through that pain. They don't want you to be disappointed. They care. They like you. So it's coming from a good place, but we're always surrounded by that. So I like reading books like this where you're surrounded by something that's the opposite. I think it's good for your subconscious. I think it's good for your psychology. I think it helps take you places where other people won't go. So this is an extremely good book, highly recommended. The Hiltons by J. Randy Taraborrelli.